Citizens of the universe, it is time for Neutral Lens Podcast episode 5. Another week is in the rearview mirror, and with it we have some topics to discuss, so let's get into it. So, first topic is another relationship one. We have a boyfriend and a girlfriend. Their ages are undisclosed, but they've been dating for roughly a year. They're young adults. The boy feels like the girl is not providing enough sexually for him. He really loves her. He wants to stay with her. He feels like, she's super fun to be around and everything, but there are some other sexual desires elsewhere that are tempting him to cheat or to leave the relationship because he feels like he's not getting everything he wants sexually out of his current relationship. So what should he do? Well, anytime you have thoughts of leaving a partner, anytime you have thoughts of cheating on a partner, that is not a good sign at all for your relationship. You may feel like you really enjoy being around her, but maybe you just enjoy being around her as a friend. You aren't getting everything you want out of the relationship, clearly. The fact that you are sort of being tempted elsewhere. So that's really not a good sign. How is she not providing sexually? Is she not doing it enough? She's not doing it as much as you want to do it. Is she bad? Or is there some other way that she's really just not meeting your needs, your desires? And, have you talked to her about it? Because if you haven't talked to her about it, that's something you can have a conversation with if it's something that she can fix, like just doing it more. If you've already talked about it and she doesn't really want to, then if it seriously bothers you enough to the point where you are looking elsewhere and you're getting tempted elsewhere, it might be time to leave. It might be time to move on because you might be happy with her now in the sense that you enjoy hanging out with her, you enjoy spending time with her. But if you don't feel fulfilled sexually and that's something that you really care about, if that's something that's really important to you, then 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, you're still going to have these desires and you're going to want to look elsewhere still. And are you going to start to resent her? Are you going to start to really lose that love that you currently have in the relationship? So I think you should ask yourself those questions. Is that important enough to you? Is that something that you care more about? It sounds like you do, but you have to be sure about this. But you aren't going to get everything you want out of a relationship. I think that is not something that really ever happens. So it just comes down to, is everything else that you have with her enough to make you happy? Is that too much to ask from anyone else? Or I guess not really too much to ask, but is that something that's really special that you feel like you wouldn't really find elsewhere? And if that's something you don't want to lose, then you're going to have to swallow your pride a little bit, because just cheating in a relationship is never the answer. You could end up throwing away a lot of good things to improve on this sexual desire you have, and just really think about it, because you might not even be happier at the end of it. Let's just say she is everything you want, except for maybe not giving you enough sexually, and you leave all of that because you want to have better sex or more sex or whatever it is, and you leave this relationship and you go with someone else who meets those needs, but all your other needs have downgraded in a sense. So you might not even be happier at the end of all that. You're just kind of stuck in limbo because, you improved the one thing that you kind of were missing from this relationship, but everything else got worse. And now you're left desiring these other things that have now sort of fallen below your standards. So really think about what you're throwing away. Is everything else that great? Is everything else going to be something that you're really going to miss from her? Because you do say you love her and you want to stay with her and you enjoy being around her. So, is that something that you want to throw away? And if not, is that something where you can swallow your pride and just say, that's fine. Sexual side, that's totally fine. Because if you can't do that, it doesn't matter how much you enjoy being with her now, you're going to want to leave later. And it's at that point, it's not throwing everything away. It's just you understand that you both need to be happy and you're not going to be. So you want to end the relationship there and just try and find something else, if that makes sense. I'm not sure if it does. I guess what I'm trying to say is, if you aren't going to be happy, then you shouldn't be staying with her. but don't chase sex for this, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Okay, we'll go to topic number 2. Why do people always want other people to fail? You see this a lot in really everywhere. A good example is sports. Like, I am a sports fan, and you see players or fans of players rather all the time. They want certain players or certain teams to fail so that they can feel like they have a bit of success, if that makes sense. It's a really, really negative mindset. I think it's super bad. And a lot of it is based on the idea that like other people cannot be better than you or better than the player that you support, the team that you support, things like that. And it really comes down to just, pride. For example, if you were like interviewing for a job and you don't get the job and someone else gets it, you kind of want them to fail because you're like, how can this guy be better than me? And you want to see them fail and be like, okay, well, they made the wrong decision, so that you can feel better about yourself and say, hey, they made the wrong decision. That guy wasn't better than me. I am better. Instead of just accepting, hey, maybe that other candidate was just better qualified, and to kind of just wish everyone the best. A lot of it does come down to ego. A lot of it does come down to pride. You want to be right and you want to be better, if that makes sense. And what ends up happening when you think that way is you end up tearing other people down to the level that you're at, rather than wanting to lift everyone else up. So like the idea of you can't be better than me, and instead of improving myself to be as good as you can only be as good as me. I don't know if that makes sense. Like if you see, for example, Shohei Ohtani, who's one of the biggest baseball stars in the world. He's taken over MLB by storm these last few years, and he got offered a giant contract. You have his fans, you have his supporters, but you also have his detractors who, I think for a lot of people who don't like him, it really comes down to the idea of like, they have a certain player that they like or a certain team that they like, and they don't want to believe that this guy is better than him or that whatever the team that they support or whatever it is. And so they end up saying like, oh, this guy can't be that good. He's only hyped because he can pitch and hit at well at the same time. They're only paying him so much because of whatever, maybe Japan or like some kind of crazy reason that they come up with. Anything to avoid saying that he is the star that he is because he's really good at baseball. Anything to avoid saying that, as long as it's not saying he's just better than I want to admit he is, because my ego won't allow it. I don't want to think he's good. I want to say that, he's having success or that he is having these massive contracts because of any other reason. It's a super, super negative mindset. And you can even see it in politics. That's a really good place to see it, where, the current Donald Trump administration, the previous Joe Biden administration, you can kind of see it on both sides, where the party that's not in power, instead of rooting for the president to do well for the sake of the country, you end up rooting against him and hoping that he sort of tears everything down because it's going to help your party's chances for re-election. So you want to see the citizens suffer under him. You want everything to be negative, because that gives you a better chance of saying like, hey, I can be better than this, instead of saying, I hope he does as well as he can and as well as possible for the sake of the whole country, even if that means my party is not going to have as good of a shot because everyone's going to like what he's doing and is going to keep going. You could see that really on both sides of it, Republicans and Democrats, where everyone just wants everyone else to fail, So it's a bad mindset. And I think that like it is a big thing in politics because there's only one real party in power in a way. Like if you're not in power, you can't really do anything. So you just have to hope that they don't do good things so that you can get back in. It's sort of a competition at the end of the day. So that's what you want. But you're really in there to try and improve the country, So I think that you should be hoping on both sides of the aisle that you both do well, if that makes sense. You're both serving the interests of the country, doing the things that are going to help. And whether or not that actually happens, up to you to decide. But, maybe don't be rooting for everyone else to fail. But in everything else, like you don't need to be the only one to have success. You don't need to have everyone else fail for you to be able to succeed. Obviously in competitions, there is one winner and a bunch of losers, especially when it comes to like winning the Super Bowl, winning the World Series, things like that. But you can still do very, very well and have someone else do very, very well and have that both be okay. It doesn't need to be this constant competition of like someone's better than someone else or someone else gotta lose out so that you can feel better about your team not winning. You don't need to be the only one to have success for it to be successful, if that makes sense. Someone wins the Super Bowl every year. It might be Patrick Mahomes a bunch of times. It might have been Tom Brady a bunch of times. But that doesn't mean that your player doesn't have success in their career. You don't have to try and make excuses for everyone. I waffled too long about that one. All good. Let's go to the last topic. This one's it's a bit of an interesting one. Do TikTok creators deserve their fame and fortune? It's the idea that like you, especially in the like media and content creation world, you see people make these really high effort long form videos, like 25, 30, maybe even more minutes. And, they get a few 100,000 views for a really, really high quality production. And then someone goes on TikTok, records themselves dancing for 6 seconds, and then makes like $1 million off of that little short. So do they deserve the kind of fame and fortune for putting in so little effort? And the answer is like, yes, they do. TikTok took advantage of an opportunity as a company to say, like, a lot of people want and really like are attracted to short form content. You can blame social media, you can blame the internet culture for that, or say whatever you want, but that's the reality of this situation, is that TikTok took advantage of what people wanted, and the TikTok creators jumped on that opportunity to say, hey, this is what people like to consume short form for multiple hours at a time because of ADHD, because of short attention span, whatever it is. And they hopped on that train. They became successful off of it because people wanted to watch it and they got paid for it. That does not make them less deserving just because they filmed themselves once a week dancing in front of a camera, because again, that's what people want. You have to take advantage of what people want. If it doesn't matter how much effort you put into something, like if you spent 35 hours making a perfect painting and no one really cared about it, then it doesn't matter how much you worked on it. You're not going to get much for it. But if you only spent 30 minutes, but you created something that people are really interested in, that's going to get paid. And you can say that they put in a lot less effort. You can say that it wasn't as creative. You can say whatever you want, but at the end of the day, people's interest dictates where the money goes. And if that happens to be TikTok, that happens to be TikTok. And these people are taking advantage of that system. And it's a little unfair to the people who put in tons of effort elsewhere, but such is life. Your job, if that's your job as a content creator, is to produce content for the masses. And if you can't attract people to your content, no matter whether it's just because the human brain doesn't really like that stuff, you're not really doing your job. I don't want to say you're not doing your job right, because at the end of the day, you can just do whatever you want. But, you have to appeal to the masses, no matter how stupid you think it is, if you really want to succeed. But like, also, are we going to call lottery winners undeserving? Like, I guess you can, but, they just happen to be the one lucky guy to get all the numbers right. And it is very, very much luck, but does that make them undeserving of getting 50, 100, 200 million dollars, sometimes even $1 billion. We've seen lottery winners get $1 billion, which I think works out to like 400 something million in lump sum cash. But anyway, taxes. Yeah, sometimes you just get lucky, you know? That's life. It's not exactly fair, but that doesn't make someone undeserving just because they were in the right place at the right time, or they just happen to draw the right numbers. That doesn't make them undeserving of success. It still is very unlikely, and it just so happened to fall upon them, you know? Or if you were just in the right place at the right time, let's say as a musician, to get noticed, and that's what helped you go big, even though you feel like someone else is super talented and they never really got that opportunity, you know, it doesn't make that person undeserving just because they were someone else you feel like was better. You know, they still have to take advantage of that opportunity. You still need to be able to grasp it and do something with it. And that takes skill. You know, a lot of people can get opportunities, but if they can't do anything with it, it doesn't even matter. So it still takes skill to be able to take advantage of whatever it is. And same thing applies to TikTok, where maybe, you know, these people are putting in not much effort, but they still have to dance well, and they still have to understand how to captivate an audience, if only for 6 seconds. So it takes a skill to be able to do that. So I don't know. I see a lot of people saying that it's undeserving, that they're stupid, and you can think whatever you want. I don't go on the app. You know, I think to have that sort of stuff be constantly drilled into my head is really bad for me. You know, I don't like that stuff, but that doesn't mean that other people can't like that stuff, and that doesn't mean that the people who supply that content are undeserving of the fame and the fortune that they're getting, if that makes sense. All right, I think I'll do it for episode 5. Thank you guys for listening. Again, if you want to submit any questions, any topics, whatever you want me to discuss, at Neutral Lens Pod on all socials, and I will see you guys next week.